During the return journey to Coalition headquarters, Zethkar found himself spending hours in the ship's common areas, drawn to conversations with Jake Morrison and Lisa Rodriguez. What he discovered during these casual interactions proved far more disturbing than their combat capabilities. The humans revealed aspects of their species that challenged everything he understood about civilized behavior. Jake invited Zethkar to join him for coffee in the ship's mess hall on the second day of their journey. The human seemed genuinely friendly, asking questions about Zethkar's homeworld and sharing stories about Earth's diverse cultures. The conversation felt completely normal until Jake casually mentioned human evolutionary history. "You know, Commander, your people evolved from herbivorous stock, right? I can tell by your dentition and digestive system adaptations." Zethkar nodded, uncertain where this observation was leading. "Humans evolved differently," Jake continued, stirring his coffee with apparent disinterest. "We're persistence hunters. Our ancestors would pick a prey animal and follow it for days, sometimes weeks, until it collapsed from exhaustion. Then we'd kill it and eat it." The reptilian commander felt his scales prickle. "That seems remarkably inefficient compared to other hunting strategies." Jake shrugged. "Maybe, but it gave us some useful traits. We're really good at tracking things over long distances. We don't give up easily when we want something, and we've learned to be very patient when we're pursuing a goal." Lisa joined them at the table, carrying her own cup of the dark liquid humans seemed to consume constantly. "What are you two talking about?" "I was explaining human persistence hunting to Commander Zethkar." Lisa nodded knowingly. "That explains a lot about human behavior, doesn't it? We still do it, just with different targets. Remember the insurgency of New Singapore? Those rebels thought they could hide in the asteroid belt indefinitely." "How long did that operation take?" Jake asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. 8 months. We tracked down every single cell, one by one, until they surrendered unconditionally. Command wanted to negotiate after the first month, but we convinced them to let us finish the job properly. Zethkar stared at Lisa as she discussed pursuing enemies for 8 months as if it were a pleasant memory. 8 months seems excessive for dealing with a rebellion." "Not really," Lisa replied. "The important thing was making sure they understood that hiding from humans doesn't work. Word spreads when you do a job thoroughly. Other potential rebels think twice when they know surrender is their only real option." Jake nodded agreement. "Humans have a saying, 'You can run, but you'll only die tired.' It's basically our species motto." Dr. Krellin approached their table, carrying a datapad filled with his research notes. "Excuse me, but I've been analyzing your combat performance data. Could you help me understand some anomalies in your psychological profiles?" "Sure, Doc. What kind of anomalies?" "Your stress hormone levels actually decrease during combat situations. Most species experience massive increases in stress responses when facing life-threatening circumstances." Lisa laughed, a sound that somehow made Zethkar's blood run cold. "That's because combat isn't life-threatening for us, Doc. Combat is when we're most alive. Everything else is just waiting around for something interesting to happen." "I don't understand." Jake leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "Doctor, what do you know about human recreational activities?" "I've read reports about various forms of entertainment and leisure pursuits." "Did those reports mention that humans voluntarily participate in activities specifically designed to simulate mortal danger?" Dr. Krellin consulted his datapad. "I see references to extreme sports and competitive fighting, but surely these are pursued by only small portions of your population." "Actually, most humans engage in some form of risk-seeking behavior," Lisa explained. "We jump out of aircraft for fun. We race vehicles at deadly speeds. We climb mountains that kill people regularly. We compete in sports where the entire point is to physically dominate other humans. But why would anyone voluntarily seek dangerous experiences?" Jake and Lisa exchanged one of their meaningful looks before Jake answered. "Because humans get bored easily, and boredom is actually painful for us. We need stimulation, challenges, obstacles to overcome. When our environment doesn't provide enough natural dangers, we create artificial ones." Zethkar found himself thinking about his own species' recreational activities. Velnathi enjoyed contemplative pursuits like meditation, artistic expression, and philosophical discussion. The idea of seeking danger for entertainment seemed incomprehensible. "This applies to military service as well?" he asked. "Especially military service," Lisa confirmed. "Combat is the ultimate test of human capabilities. It requires everything we're naturally good at: quick thinking, physical coordination, stress management, tactical planning, and the ability to function effectively in life or death situations." Dr. Kralin made notes on his datapad. "So military service is recreational for humans?" "Not exactly recreational," Jake clarified. "It's more like fulfilling our purpose. Humans evolved to be very good at organized violence. When we're not fighting something, we feel incomplete." This revelation hit Zethkar like a physical blow. The humans weren't reluctant warriors forced into combat by circumstances. They were a species that found meaning and satisfaction in warfare itself. "Is this why humanity joined the Galactic Coalition?" he asked carefully. Lisa's smile returned, that expression that had been haunting Zethkar's thoughts. "Partly, yes. Earth's population was getting restless. We'd achieved relative peace among human nations, which sounds good in theory, but in practice it meant 40 billion people with nothing to fight." 40 billion? Current Earth population, yes. And that's just the home world. Human colonies throughout Coalition space probably add another 20 billion to the total. Jake leaned back in his chair. "The Coalition offered us something we desperately needed, a legitimate outlet for human nature. Instead of fighting each other, we could fight threats to galactic civilization. But surely most humans prefer peaceful pursuits." "Commander," Lisa said gently, "every human who reaches adulthood completes mandatory military training. Every single one. We have 40 billion people with combat experience and access to advanced weapons technology. The implications of this statement settled over Zethkar like a cold weight. Humanity wasn't a peaceful species that had developed military capabilities. They were a military species that had developed the appearance of peaceful civilization. "What about human families, art, culture, scientific advancement?" Dr. Krellin asked desperately. "All important," Jake agreed. "But they exist within a framework designed around our fundamental nature. Human art celebrates conflict and heroism. Our science advances fastest when we're competing against other humans or solving problems related to warfare. Our families are support structures that enable individuals to function effectively as warriors." Lisa nodded. "Even our recreational literature focuses on conflict resolution through violence. We tell stories about heroes who defeat enemies through superior combat skills." Zethkar thought about the cultural exchanges between coalition species. Each race had shared examples of their finest artistic achievements. He now realized that every human contribution had involved themes of struggle, conflict, and victory over adversity. "Commander," Jake said, his tone becoming more serious, "I want you to understand something important. Humans chose to join the coalition because we believe in your ideals of peace and cooperation. But we maintain that peace through the implied threat of overwhelming force." "Implied threat?" "Think about it," Lisa explained. "How many major conflicts has the coalition faced since humanity joined 15 years ago?" Zethkar considered the question. "Very few. Most potential aggressors have chosen negotiation over military action. That's because word has spread throughout the galaxy about what happens when someone threatens coalition civilians. The Drakmor won't be sharing their experiences, but other hostile species got the message." Jake finished his coffee and stood up from the table. "We're not trying to intimidate our allies, Commander. But it's important that you understand what you're dealing with. Humans are apex predators who have chosen to be civilized. That choice requires constant effort and clear purpose. What happens if humans lose that sense of purpose?" Lisa also stood, preparing to leave. "Then we'll find something else to fight, Commander. We always do. The question is whether our allies prefer us fighting threats to coalition space or fighting each other for entertainment." As the humans left the mess hall, Zethkar found himself staring at his reflection in his empty cup. Everything he thought he understood about galactic politics had just been redefined. The coalition's recent era of peace and stability wasn't the result of successful diplomacy or moral evolution. It was the result of potential enemies deciding they didn't want to face humanity in combat. Dr. Krellin looked up from his notes. "Commander, I need to ask you something. Are we safe traveling with these humans?" Zethkar considered the question carefully. After 3 days of observation, he had reached a disturbing conclusion. Humans weren't dangerous because they were malicious or unpredictable. The Coalition Council chambers had never hosted a more contentious debate in their 300-year history. Representatives from 47 different species filled the circular assembly hall, their various forms of agitated communication creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, chirps, and harmonic vibrations that threatened to overwhelm the universal translators. Zethkar stood at the central podium, his comprehensive report displayed on screens throughout the chamber. 3 weeks had passed since the Kepler 442b incident, and his findings had shaken the foundation of everything the Coalition believed about their human allies. "The evidence is undeniable," he announced, his voice cutting through the noise. "Humanity represents a fundamental paradigm shift in our understanding of galactic civilization. They are not a peaceful species that has developed military capabilities. They are a military species that has learned to simulate peaceful behavior." Ambassador Kletavi of the crystalline Zarteth raised one of her prismatic appendages. "Commander Zethkar, your report suggests that 2 individual humans eliminated several thousand Drakmor warriors. Surely this is an exaggeration," I observed. "The aftermath personally, Ambassador. I spoke with the humans involved. They discussed the elimination of an entire Drakmor occupation force as if it were routine maintenance work. High Counselor Mertok, the eldest member of the Assembly, activated his communication device with one massive tentacle. Even if we accept your observations, Commander, this could represent exceptional individuals rather than typical human capabilities. That's what I initially believed, High Counselor. However, subsequent research has revealed that Jake Morrison and Lisa Rodriguez represent standard human military training. They are not elite forces or specially enhanced warriors. They are ordinary infantry soldiers. A wave of concerned communication swept through the chamber as representatives processed this information. The implications were staggering if typical human soldiers possessed such capabilities. Captain Veltar approached the podium to support his tactical advisor. "Honored counselors, Commander Zethkar's findings align with other recent observations of human behavior. Our military liaisons have reported similar incidents throughout Coalition space." "What kind of incidents?" demanded Ambassador Thuvyan of the peaceful Lirtai. 3 months ago, a human merchant vessel was attacked by pirates in the Centauri sector. The pirates boarded the ship expecting to find helpless civilians. Instead, they found 37 human crew members who had transformed their cargo hauler into a weapons platform. The entire pirate fleet was eliminated within hours. High Counselor Mertok's tentacles curled with distress. One merchant vessel defeated an entire pirate fleet. The humans said they were between scheduled entertainment periods and welcomed the opportunity for stimulating activity. They treated armed piracy as a recreational challenge. Zethkar activated the next section of his presentation, showing psychological profiles and cultural analysis. "Counselors, I must share the most disturbing aspect of my research. Humans do not engage in warfare reluctantly. They find combat psychologically rewarding." The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. During my conversations with Morrison and Rodriguez, they explained that humans evolved as persistence hunters. Their entire psychological framework is built around pursuing and eliminating targets over extended periods. They experience reduced stress and increased satisfaction during combat situations. Ambassador Kletavi's crystalline form shifted through several color spectrums, indicating extreme agitation. "Commander, are you suggesting that humans are naturally violent?" "Not violent in the sense of being cruel or malicious, Ambassador. They are naturally competitive and find meaning through overcoming challenges. When those challenges involve life or death situations, humans become most effective." Jake Morrison and Lisa Rodriguez entered the chamber as scheduled witnesses. their presence creating a noticeable shift in the assembly's atmosphere. Both humans wore standard coalition uniforms and appeared completely relaxed, despite being the subject of galactic-level political controversy. High Counselor Mertok addressed them directly. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, Sergeant Rodriguez, this assembly needs to understand the implications of Commander Zethkar's report. Do you represent typical human capabilities? Jake stepped forward with casual confidence. High Counselor, Lisa and I are standard infantry personnel with basic combat training. Most human civilians have similar or superior capabilities. Similar or superior? Lisa nodded. Military personnel represent maybe 15% of Earth's population, High Counselor. The other 85% includes people who hunt dangerous animals for recreation, compete in combat sports professionally, or participate in what we call extreme activities for entertainment. Ambassador Thuven leaned forward urgently. Are you saying that civilian humans are more dangerous than military personnel? Not more dangerous, Jake clarified. Just differently focused. Military personnel like Lisa and myself are trained for coordinated operations and civilian protection. Civilian hunters and athletes are trained for individual performance and competitive success. The implication sent another wave of distressed communication through the assembly. High Counselor, Lisa continued, I think there might be some misunderstanding about human nature. We're not aggressive toward allies or neutral parties. We're protective of people we consider friends and family. But you eliminated thousands of enemy combatants without apparent emotional impact. Because they were threatening coalition civilians, Jake explained. When someone threatens our friends, we respond appropriately. The Drakmor chose to attack helpless families. That made our response their responsibility, not ours. High Counselor Mertok's tentacles writhed as he processed this logic. You feel no guilt about the scale of destruction you caused? Should we? Lisa asked genuinely. We protected innocent people from creatures that would have tortured and consumed them. That seems like a positive outcome to everyone involved. Zethkar realized the humans genuinely couldn't understand why their actions might be considered disturbing. From their perspective, they had simply solved a problem using available resources. Counselors, he announced, I believe we are approaching this question incorrectly. The issue is not whether humans are dangerous. The issue is whether we can maintain beneficial relationships with beings whose fundamental psychology is so different from our own. Explain, Commander. Humans chose to join the coalition because they believe in our ideals of peace and cooperation. But they maintain that peace through methods that other species find terrifying. The question facing this assembly is whether we can accept protection from allies whose capabilities exceed our understanding. Ambassador Kletavi shifted through several more color spectrums. Commander, what are you recommending? I recommend that we acknowledge what humanity brings to the coalition and adapt our expectations accordingly. Humans are not like other species. They don't seek peace because they fear conflict. They choose peace because they believe it serves their long-term interests. And if they change their minds about those interests? Jake stepped forward again. Ambassador, humans have a saying, don't borrow trouble. We've been reliable coalition allies for 15 years. We've protected civilian populations, maintained trade route security, and respected non-interference protocols. Why assume we'll suddenly become a threat? Because your capabilities suggest you could eliminate any coalition member species without significant effort, Lisa shrugged casually. Ambassador, we could have eliminated coalition species before joining the coalition. If conquest was our goal, why would we bother with diplomacy and trade negotiations? The logic was unassailable, but somehow that made it more disturbing rather than less. High Counselor Mertok called for a formal vote. This assembly must decide whether to maintain current relationships with humanity or request modifications to their coalition membership. The debate continued for 3 more hours, but Zethkar already knew the outcome. The coalition needed humanity's protection more than they feared humanity's capabilities. Recent peace and stability throughout coalition space wasn't coincidence. It was the direct result of potential enemies deciding they didn't want to face humans in combat. When the final vote was tallied, 43 species voted to maintain current relationships with humanity. Only 4 species requested restrictions, and those were overruled by the majority. After the session ended, Zethkar found himself walking with Jake and Lisa toward the station's civilian sectors. "Commander," Jake said conversationally, "I hope you understand that humans appreciate being accepted as we are. Most species seem to expect us to change into something we're not." "What are you exactly?" Lisa considered the question carefully. "We're apex predators who have chosen to be civilized, Commander. That choice requires constant effort, but we think it's worth making." "What happens if you decide it's not worth the effort?" "Then we'll find something else to fight," Jake replied matter-of-factly. "We always do. But hopefully our friends will continue giving us reasons to fight for them, rather than against them." As the humans departed for their scheduled leave, Zethkar realized he had finally understood the true meaning of terror. 3 days had passed since the evacuation, and Zethkar found himself unable to focus on routine duties aboard the Starweaver. Captain Veltar had filed the mission report as a standard civilian rescue operation, but Zethkar knew the truth was far more complex. The images of Jake Morrison and Lisa Rodriguez systematically eliminating hundreds of Drakmor warriors played continuously in his mind. Against direct orders from Coalition Command, Zethkar assembled a covert reconnaissance team to return to the planet's surface. He told himself this was necessary research for future tactical assessments, but privately, he admitted his growing obsession with understanding what he had witnessed. Dr. Krellin volunteered immediately, driven by scientific curiosity about human combat capabilities. Aquilin joined the team as their sensor specialist, though she expressed concerns about violating Coalition non-interference protocols. The 3-person team departed in a stealth-equipped shuttle during the ship's sleep cycle, when most crew members would be in their quarters. The planet's surface had changed dramatically during their absence. The smoke had cleared, revealing the true scope of devastation across the former colony. What Zethkar now observed went beyond typical battle damage. This landscape showed signs of systematic hunting, with clear trails leading between different areas of destruction. "Commander," Aquilin announced from her sensor station, "I'm detecting massive biosignature readings throughout the region. Thousands of Drakmor life signs when we left, but now..." She paused, checking her instruments again. "Now I'm only reading scattered individual signatures, maybe 30 total across the entire continent." Zethkar felt his scales ripple with concern. In 3 days, the humans had reduced a Drakmor occupation force from thousands to dozens. The mathematical implications were staggering, but the tactical implications were worse. They landed near what had been the colony's industrial sector, where heavy machinery and storage facilities offered numerous hiding places for surviving Drakmor warriors. The silence struck Zethkar immediately. During their previous visit, the area had echoed with the sounds of hunting packs moving through the ruins. Now he heard only wind moving through broken structures. Dr. Krellin activated his portable scanner as they began exploring on foot. "Commander, I'm detecting trace biological evidence of recent combat activity. Multiple Drakmor casualties, but the pattern distribution is highly unusual." "Unusual how?" "The bodies appear to have been moved or arranged after death. Also, many show signs of having died from stress-induced cardiac failure rather than direct trauma." Zethkar examined the evidence more closely. Dead Drakmor warriors lay in positions suggesting they had been running when they died. Their facial expressions, frozen in death, showed absolute terror. These were creatures that had spent their lives as apex predators, yet they had died in complete panic. "Aquilin, are you detecting any human life signs?" "Negative, Commander, but our sensors have limited range in this terrain. They could be anywhere within a 50-kilometer radius." The team moved deeper into the industrial zone, following clear signs of recent activity. Zethkar began noticing elaborate constructions made from scavenged materials. Metal beams had been arranged to create funnel-shaped passages that would force anyone traveling through them into predictable paths. Debris piles formed barriers that would channel movement toward specific locations. "These aren't random battle remains," Zethkar observed. "Someone has been modifying the terrain for tactical advantage." Dr. Krellin studied one of the constructed passages with his instruments. "Commander, This shows clear evidence of engineering, knowledge. The angles and structural supports are mathematically optimized to create psychological pressure on anyone moving through the space. Psychological pressure? The confined space and limited sight lines would trigger claustrophobic responses in most species, but more importantly, the acoustic properties would amplify sound, making anyone inside feel like they were broadcasting their location to potential predators. Aquilin discovered the first elaborate trap approximately 200 meters from their landing site. A section of collapsed building had been carefully arranged to appear like natural debris, but closer examination revealed a sophisticated triggering mechanism. Heavy steel beams had been positioned to fall in a specific pattern when disturbed. "The engineering is remarkable," Dr. Krellin commented. This trap would be completely invisible to casual observation, but lethal to anyone who activated it. The psychological impact would be enormous too. Survivors would know their enemies were not just hunting them, but turning their environment into a weapon. As they continued exploring, Zethkar began to understand the scope of what the humans had accomplished. The entire industrial zone had been transformed into a maze designed to confuse, terrify, and eliminate anyone who entered. Every possible path had been modified to create tactical advantages for defenders who understood the system. "Commander," Aquilin called from ahead, "I think you need to see this." She led them to what had been a Drakmor staging area, where the aliens had established a temporary command post. The site showed signs of having housed several hundred warriors, with defensive positions and supply caches arranged in traditional Drakmor tactical formations. Now, the entire area was silent and empty. Dead warriors lay in neat rows, as if someone had organized them for inspection. Their weapons remained in their hands, but their expressions showed they had died in absolute terror rather than combat fury. Dr. Krellin began scanning the bodies methodically. "Commander, these warriors died over a period of several hours, but there are no signs of direct combat. Most appear to have succumbed to stress-related organ failure." "They were scared to death?" "Literally, yes. Their biological systems were overwhelmed by fear responses. But Commander, look at the positioning. They were arranged this way after death. Someone spent considerable time organizing these bodies." Zethkar studied the scene more carefully. The arrangement wasn't random or respectful. The bodies had been positioned to create maximum psychological impact on anyone who discovered them. This was a message, a demonstration of complete dominance over forces that had terrorized entire sectors of the galaxy. "We need to find the humans," he announced. "I need to understand what kind of beings we've allied ourselves with." They followed a clear trail leading toward the colony's former residential district. Along the way, they discovered more evidence of systematic hunting. Abandoned Drakmor equipment lay scattered along the path, as if the aliens had been dropping their gear while fleeing. Food supplies had been left half-consumed, suggesting the warriors had abandoned their positions in sudden panic. "Commander," Aquilin announced, "I'm detecting 2 human life signs approximately 3 kilometers ahead. They appear to be stationary." As they approached the location, Zethkar began hearing an unexpected sound: human voices, speaking in conversational tones as if they were discussing routine matters. The casual nature of their dialogue created a surreal contrast with the devastation surrounding them. They found Jake Morrison and Lisa Rodriguez sitting beside a small campfire, sharing what appeared to be military rations. Around them, the remains of what had been the largest Drakmor command bunker lay in ruins. The massive concrete structure had been systematically dismantled, leaving only scattered chunks of debris. Jake noticed their approach and waved casually. "Commander Zethkar, good to see you again. How did the civilian evacuation go?" Zethkar stared at the 2 humans, trying to process what he was seeing. They appeared completely relaxed, as if they were on a camping trip rather than in the middle of a devastated war zone. Lisa had removed her boots and was warming her feet near the fire. "The evacuation was successful," he managed to answer. "All 3,000 civilians were safely relocated to coalition refugee facilities." "That's great news," Lisa replied with genuine warmth. "Those families had been through enough already." Dr. Krellin stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming diplomatic protocols. "Excuse me, but we've been observing the aftermath of your activities. Could you explain your tactical approach to eliminating the Drakmor forces? Jake and Lisa exchanged one of their meaningful looks before Jake answered. Pretty standard counterinsurgency operations, really. We identified their command structure, disrupted their communication networks, and then eliminated their leadership hierarchy. But our sensors detected thousands of Drakmor warriors when we left. Yeah, there were about 4,000 total when we started, Lisa confirmed. Most of them were just regular infantry, though. Once we eliminated their command structure, the rest became disorganized. Zethkar looked around at the devastated landscape. And now? Now there are maybe a dozen left, scattered across the continent. They'll probably die of exposure before we track them all down, but we'll finish the sweep tomorrow just to be thorough. The casual way Lisa discussed eliminating thousands of enemy combatants made Zethkar's blood run cold. These humans spoke about wholesale slaughter as if it were routine maintenance work. How did you eliminate so many without sustaining casualties yourselves? Jake poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing into the darkening sky. Zethkar insisted on joining the ground team despite Captain Veltar's concerns about safety. As tactical advisor, he needed to observe the humans' defensive capabilities firsthand to properly assess the evacuation timeline. The Coalition had protocols for dealing with doomed rescue missions, and he expected this would become another tragic entry in their operational reports. The shuttle descended through the smoky atmosphere toward the planet's surface. Through the viewports, Zethkar could see the devastation spread across the landscape like a disease. What had once been a thriving agricultural colony now resembled the aftermath of a volcanic eruption. Blackened structures jutted from the ground, like broken teeth, while orange flames danced across fields of ash that had once been crops. Dr. Creelan, a Cretan xenobiologist, checked his scanning equipment nervously. Commander, I'm detecting massive Drakmor biosignatures converging on our landing zone. At least 400 individual warriors, possibly more. They're moving in coordinated hunting formations. Zethkar nodded grimly. 400 Drakmor. Warriors could overwhelm a fully equipped Coalition military unit. 2 humans with scavenged equipment faced impossible odds. He began calculating how long the evacuation would take and how many shuttles they might lose in the process. The shuttle touched down in what had been the colony's central plaza. Emergency beacon lights flickered through the smoke, guiding civilian survivors toward the landing zone. Zethkar counted roughly 3,000 people, mostly families with young children. They moved with the exhausted desperation of people who had been running for days. There, Dr. Krellin pointed toward a partially collapsed building. I'm reading 2 human life signs approximately 200 meters northeast of our position. Zethkar activated his personal communicator. Morrison Rodriguez, this is Commander Zethkar. We have visual contact with the evacuation site. What is your current tactical situation? Jake's voice came back steady and calm. Commander, we have incoming hostiles from 3 directions, estimated 400 to 500 individual contacts. They'll reach the evacuation zone in approximately 8 minutes. Understood. Can you delay them long enough for civilian loading? Affirmative. Lisa and I are moving to intercept. Maintain your evacuation schedule. Zethkar climbed out of the shuttle and immediately felt the heat from dozens of fires burning across the ruined colony. The air tasted of smoke and something else he couldn't identify. Through his optical enhancers, he could see movement in the distance as dark shapes advanced through the debris. The first group of Drakmor appeared at the eastern edge of the plaza. They moved like pack hunters, low to the ground with their weapon claws extended. Each warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall with thick armor plating covering their vital areas. Their eyes glowed red in the smoky darkness and their mouths opened to reveal rows of sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. Zethkar expected to hear the sounds of defensive fire from the humans' positions, but the battlefield remained eerily quiet. The Drakmor advanced steadily, clearly confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage. Behind them, more shapes emerged from the ruins, creating an unstoppable tide of predators converging on the helpless civilians. Then something impossible happened. A single Drakmor warrior at the front of the advancing formation suddenly collapsed. There had been no sound of weapons fire, no visible energy discharge. The creature simply dropped to the ground and did not move again. The other warriors paused, scanning the area with their enhanced senses. A second warrior fell, then a third. Now the Drakmor formation began showing signs of confusion as their packmates vanished without apparent cause. They started moving more cautiously, spreading out to avoid presenting concentrated targets. "Commander," came Lisa's voice through, his communicator, "you might want to keep the civilians focused on boarding. Things are about to get noisy." Before Zethkar could respond, the Eastern Drakmor formation erupted into chaos. Warriors began falling in rapid succession, while others spun wildly, trying to identify the source of the attack. Through his optical enhancers, Zethkar caught brief glimpses of movement between the ruined buildings, but nothing that registered as a clear target. Jake's voice joined the communication channel. "Lisa, I count 60 down on the eastern approach. How are you doing with the southern group?" 43 eliminated, but they're starting to adapt, switching to direct engagement. Zethkar watched in fascination as a human figure suddenly appeared among the southern Drakmor formation. It was Lisa Rodriguez, moving through the enemy warriors with fluid grace. She carried what appeared to be a piece of broken rebar, using it to strike precise points on the alien's armor. Each strike resulted in an immediate kill, though Zethkar couldn't understand how such a simple weapon could penetrate Drakmor protection. The surviving warriors turned to engage her, but Lisa was no longer where they expected. She moved between them like flowing water, never remaining in one position long enough for them to coordinate an attack. Within minutes, the entire southern formation lay motionless on the ground. "Jake, southern approach is clear. How's your progress?" "Almost finished. These northern guys are smarter than the others, but not smart enough." Zethkar turned his attention to the northern edge of the plaza where the largest Drakmor formation had been advancing. Now he could see Jake Morrison engaged with the remaining enemy forces, but what he observed defied all his understanding of individual combat capabilities. Jake moved through the battlefield with mechanical precision, turning every piece of debris into a deadly weapon. A chunk of concrete became a projectile that struck a Drakmor warrior with enough force to crack its armor. A length of twisted metal became a lever that allowed him to redirect an enemy's charge into a collision with its packmates. What disturbed Zethkar most was the complete absence of emotion in the human's actions. Jake didn't fight like someone defending his life or protecting others. He moved like someone performing a routine maintenance task, efficiently solving problems with whatever tools happened to be available. "Commander," Dr. Krellin whispered beside him, "are you recording this? My sensors are showing impossible readings." "What kind of readings?" "The humans aren't exhibiting any stress responses. Their heart rates are actually lower than baseline. Their brain activity suggests they're more relaxed now than they were during our initial communication." Zethkar stared at the data on Dr. Krellin's scanner. The information made no sense. Facing overwhelming odds against natural predators should trigger massive stress responses in any sentient being. Instead, the humans appeared to be enjoying themselves. The Western Drakmor formation finally reached the plaza's edge, only to discover they were the last group still functional. They hesitated, clearly confused by the absence of their packmates. This hesitation proved fatal as both humans converged on their positions simultaneously. What followed wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was more like watching a natural disaster consume everything in its path. Jake and Lisa moved through the remaining Drakmor warriors with choreographed efficiency, each anticipating the other's actions perfectly. Within minutes, the plaza fell silent except for the crackling of distant fires. Zethkar found himself staring at approximately 500 dead Drakmor warriors scattered across the battlefield. The same creatures that had devastated entire planetary defense forces lay motionless in neat patterns, as if someone had been arranging furniture rather than fighting for survival. Jake and Lisa walked calmly toward the evacuation shuttles, neither showing any signs of fatigue or injury. Jake's uniform was slightly dusty, while Lisa had a small tear in her sleeve. Otherwise, they appeared completely unaffected by what had just occurred. "Commander," Jake called out as he approached, "the immediate area is secure. Your evacuation can proceed normally. We recommend maintaining standard safety protocols, though. Standard safety protocols, Zethkar repeated slowly. After eliminating 500 Drakmor warriors, Lisa shrugged casually. Well, there might be more groups in the area. We only cleared the ones that were threatening your landing zone. Dr. Krellin stepped forward, his compound eyes fixed on the humans with scientific fascination. How did you achieve such precise strikes against Drakmor armor? Our military analysts consider their protection nearly impenetrable to conventional weapons. Jake held up the piece of rebar he had been using. You just have to understand weak points. Drakmor physiology has several vulnerable spots where their armor segments connect. Basic anatomy, really. But the speed of your attacks, the coordination between you both, the absence of any apparent tactical planning. Lisa smiled, an expression that somehow made Zethkar's scales prickle with unease. We did plan, Doctor. Jake and I talked about it while you were landing. We decided to use Budapest Protocol since we were dealing with pack hunters. Budapest Protocol? Urban combat training we received back on Earth. Pretty standard stuff for infantry personnel. Zethkar looked around the battlefield again, trying to reconcile the term standard stuff with the complete annihilation he had just witnessed. Every tactical principle he understood suggested this outcome was impossible. Two individuals could not eliminate 500 experienced warriors in direct combat. Commander Zethkar adjusted his scaled hands on the control panel as the coalition ship Starweaver moved through the dark space between stars. His reptilian eyes watched the screens that showed nothing but empty void ahead. The ship carried 47 different species working together under the Galactic Coalition banner, all dedicated to peace and cooperation among the stars. Zethkar had served as tactical advisor for 3 years now, helping resolve conflicts through careful negotiation, rather than violence. The bridge buzzed with quiet activity as various crew members attended to their duties. Captain Veltar, a tall insectoid cretin, clicked his mandibles softly while reviewing navigation charts. His compound eyes reflected the blue glow of the displays. Near the communication station, Aqualin moved her webbed fingers across the controls, her blue skin shimmering slightly under the artificial lights. The Merdai were natural swimmers but had adapted well to space travel. A harsh alarm suddenly pierced the peaceful atmosphere. Red lights flashed across all stations as emergency signals flooded the communication array. Zethkar straightened his posture, feeling his military training kick in automatically. Captain Veltar's wings buzzed briefly, a sign of concern among his species. Report, Captain Veltar commanded in his precise, clipped voice. Aqualin's large, black eyes grew wider as she processed the incoming data. Captain, we are receiving multiple distress signals from the Orion sector. The colony world Kepler 442b is under attack. The signals indicate civilian populations in immediate danger. Zethkar pulled up the tactical display on his station. The information flowing across his screen made his blood run cold. The attacking force belonged to the Drakmor horde, a savage species known throughout the galaxy for their cruelty. They consumed other sentient beings and showed no mercy to civilians. Entire worlds had been stripped of all life by Drakmor raids. What forces are defending the colony? Zethkar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Minimal defensive capabilities, Aqualin replied, her voice carrying the weight of bad news. The colony was established only 5 years ago. Most residents are civilians with basic emergency training only. Captain Veltar's mandibles clicked rapidly, another sign of stress. The coalition had strict policies about interference in local conflicts, but they could not ignore civilian populations facing extinction. Set course for Kepler 442b, maximum speed. Prepare evacuation protocols. The Starweaver changed direction, its engines humming louder as they pushed toward higher speeds. Zethkar spent the next 6 hours reviewing everything known about Drakmor, tactics and capabilities. The horde traveled in massive fleets, overwhelming their targets through sheer numbers and brutality. They took no prisoners and left no survivors. Any world they attacked became a lifeless husk within days. When they finally arrived at the Kepler system, The sight that greeted them confirmed Zethkar's worst fears. Dozens of Drakmor ships surrounded the planet, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. The colony's orbital stations were already destroyed, leaving only debris clouds as evidence they had ever existed. The planet's surface showed the orange glow of fires burning across entire continents. Scanning for survivors, Aquilin announced, her voice barely above a whisper. The minutes stretched like hours as the ship's sensors swept the devastated world below. Most life signs had already vanished, but small pockets of activity still registered in scattered locations. Captain Veltar ordered the ship to maintain distance while they assessed the situation. "Captain," came a new voice through the communication system. It was strong and clear, speaking in perfect coalition standard. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Force. We have approximately 3,000 civilian survivors gathered at Evacuation Point Alpha, requesting immediate assistance." Zethkar felt his scales ripple with surprise. Humans were one of the newer species to join the coalition, having made contact only 15 years earlier. Their homeworld Earth lay far from this sector, yet apparently some had established colonies in this dangerous region of space. He had heard little about humans during his service, only that they were another bipedal species with relatively short lifespans and soft skin. "Lieutenant Colonel Morrison," Captain Veltar responded. "This is Captain Veltar of the coalition vessel Starweaver. We are prepared to begin evacuation procedures, but Drakmor forces currently surround your planet. Our approach will be extremely dangerous." "Understood, Captain. We can provide cover for your evacuation shuttles. Just give us your approach vector and timing." Zethkar studied the tactical display with growing concern. The human was speaking as if his forces could actually provide meaningful resistance against a Drakmor assault fleet. Either the human was delusional or desperately trying to maintain morale in a hopeless situation. Zethkar had seen the aftermath of Drakmor attacks. Nothing survived their overwhelming numbers and savage tactics. "Morrison," Zethkar interrupted, switching to the command frequency. "This is Commander Zethkar, Tactical Advisor. What defensive capabilities do you currently have available?" There was a brief pause before the human responded. "Commander, we have 2 active personnel and whatever we can scavenge from the colony's remains. Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez and myself." 2 personnel. Zethkar's clawed hand tightened on his control panel. 2 individuals against thousands of Drakmor warriors. The situation was even worse than he had imagined. These humans were either incredibly brave or completely insane. "Lieutenant Colonel," Captain Veltar said gently, "perhaps you should consider evacuation with the civilians. 2 people cannot hold off an entire Drakmor assault force." Another pause, then a female voice joined the channel. "Captain, this is Sergeant Rodriguez. We appreciate your concern, but we have our orders. Civilian evacuation takes priority. We'll handle the hostile forces." Zethkar found himself studying the human's psychological profiles in the Coalition database. The species was relatively new to galactic civilization, having developed faster-than-light travel only decades before making first contact. They came from a world with surprisingly diverse environments and a history of frequent conflicts between their own populations. Most interesting was a note about their unusual persistence in dangerous situations. The Starweaver moved closer to the planet, beginning its approach to the designated evacuation point. Through the view screen, Zethkar could see the surface more clearly now. Massive Drakmor dropships were landing in formation, disgorging hundreds of warriors onto the colony's remains. The aliens moved in organized hunting packs, systematically, searching for any remaining survivors. "Beginning final approach," the pilot announced. "Evacuation shuttles launching in 60 seconds. Zethkar watched his tactical display as the Starweaver's small fleet of evacuation craft descended toward the planet. The Drakmor forces immediately began converging on their landing zone, moving with the coordinated efficiency of experienced predators. In minutes, they would overwhelm any defensive positions the humans might have prepared. Then something unexpected appeared on his sensors. 2 small signatures were moving rapidly across the battlefield, positioning themselves between the incoming Drakmor forces and the evacuation point. The humans were actually advancing toward the enemy rather than taking defensive positions. "Morrison," Zethkar called urgently, "our sensors show you moving toward hostile contacts. You should fall back to defensive positions." The response came, back calm and steady. "Negative, Commander. We're moving to intercept. Sergeant Rodriguez and I discussed it, and we think it's time to show these Drakmor what humans do when someone threatens civilians." There was something in the human's tone that made Zethkar's scales prickle with an emotion he couldn't identify. It wasn't fear or desperation. If anything, the human sounded almost eager. Sergeant Rodriguez's voice came through clearly as she spoke to her companion. "Jake, remember the Geneva Protocol training? The one about proportional response?" "I remember." "Lisa, but these aren't coalition civilians being threatened." "Good point. Should we skip the restraint protocols?" "I think that would be appropriate." Zethkar stared at his display, trying to understand what he was hearing. The humans were discussing their response to overwhelming enemy forces as if they were choosing which tools to use for a routine maintenance task. Either they were in complete denial about their situation, or they understood something about warfare that he did not.